The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, Lord.
There was a man named Lazarus who lived in the village of Bethany with his two sisters, Mary and Martha, and he was ill. It was the same Mary, the sister of the sick man Lazarus, who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair. The sisters sent this message to Jesus: "Lord, the man you love is ill." On receiving this message, Jesus said, "This sickness will end not in death, but in God's glory, and through it the Son of God will be glorified." Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Yet, when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed where he was for 2 more days before saying to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea." The disciples said, "Rabbi, it is not long since the Jews wanted to stone you. Are you going back again?" Jesus replied, "Are there not 12 hours in the day? A man can walk in the daytime without stumbling, because he has the light of this world to see by. But if he walks at night, he stumbles, because there is no light to guide him." He said that, and then added, "Our friend Lazarus is resting. I am going to wake him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he is able to rest, he is sure to get better." The phrase Jesus used referred to the death of Lazarus, but they thought that by rest he meant sleep. So Jesus put it plainly: "Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, because now you will believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas, known as the twin, said to the other disciples, "Let us go too and die with him." On arriving, Jesus found that Lazarus had been in the tomb for 4 days already. Bethany is only about 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to sympathize with them over their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus had come, she went to meet him. Mary remained sitting in the house. Martha said to Jesus, "If you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, whatever you ask God, he will grant you." "Your brother," said Jesus to her, "will rise again." Martha said, "I know he will rise again at the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and the life. If anyone believes in me, even though he dies, he will live. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she said. "I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, the one who was to come into the world." When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in a low voice, "The Master is here and wants to see you." Hearing this, Mary got up quickly and went to him. Jesus had not yet come into the village. He was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were in the house sympathizing with Mary saw her get up so quickly and go out, they followed her, thinking that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Mary went to Jesus, and as soon as she saw him, she threw herself at his feet, saying, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." At the sight of her tears and those of the Jews who had followed her, Jesus said in great distress, with a sigh that came straight from the heart, "Where have you put him?" They said, "Lord, come and see." Jesus wept. And the Jews said, see how much he loved him? But there were some who remarked, he opened the eyes of the blind man. Could he not have prevented this man's death? Still sighing, Jesus reached the tomb. It was a cave with a stone to close the opening. Jesus said, "Take the stone away." Martha said to him, "Lord, by now he will smell. This is the 4th day." Jesus replied, "Have I not told you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you for hearing my prayer. I knew indeed that you always hear me, but I speak for the sake of all these who stand round me, so that they may believe it was you who sent me." When he had said this, he cried in a loud voice, "Lazarus, here, come out." The dead man came out, his feet and hands bound with bands of stuff and a cloth round his face. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him, let him go free." Many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary had seen what he did and believed in him. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Our reading today is another very, very big text. Huge, layered with meaning in every direction. Every line, every verse has more symbolic meaning than you could ever believe. But today we can't take all. Otherwise we'll be here for a very long time. So what I want to pull out of the text is what I consider its core, its kernel. I want you to hear a line in this text first. "This sickness will not end in death." Say it with me. This sickness will not end in death. Now, that's the most remarkable line for us to be reading on this day as we're facing the pandemic throughout the world and here in Trinidad and Tobago. On the eve of moving into the next stage as we go into a full lockdown of our country. In the panic that people are experiencing, in all the different ways in which people are now fearful, anxious. Cabin fever has already set in for the children who have been home now a couple of weeks, and the parents who have had to be home with them. And now we have a further lockdown again because this sickness seems to be so all-pervasive, so powerful. It seems to be so invincible. It takes over a country and it does what it wants with the country. And yet we have to believe what the word teaches us. The sickness will not end in death. The sickness will not end in death. That will not be the final end. As we listen to this text of Martha, Mary, Lazarus, these are the closest family of Jesus when he comes into Jerusalem. He comes up the Mount of Olives. He goes into the Garden of Gethsemane. He passes along into Bethany. It's a very short distance from Jerusalem to Bethany. And whenever he's in Jerusalem, that's where he goes and that's where he stays. This is a family that he's very close to. And yet, when he got the message that your friend Lazarus is ill, come, Jesus does the strangest thing ever. He waits 2 days. And the disciples are confused. But I thought he's your good friend. Yeah, it's because I love him I'm waiting. Now you figure that logic out. Because I love him, that's why I'm waiting. I'm not rushing to help him. Because I love him, I am waiting. Now that is a piece of illogic that will boggle your mind for weeks. Because the love of God is displayed in this text in a way that is totally contrary to how we human beings believe and think. And therefore, how we think God should be acting. If he really loves us, he should spare us. If he really loves us, he should not allow this to reach to this stage. If he really loves us, he should have done something to wipe this out already. But Jesus says, because I love him, I'm waiting 2 days. Because I love him. Now, that is a way of understanding that you could only understand if you understand the man born blind. Because again, in that text, it says that who sinned? The man or his mother or his father? Jesus said, neither of them. He was born this way that the glory of God may be revealed. And so too in this case with Lazarus, so too in this case with COVID-19. This is happening so that the glory of God will be revealed. That's why it's happening. That the glory of God will be revealed. How? Well, look at the text and the emotions in the text. Incredible human emotions. Incredible. Incredible. The disciples are confounded. How come he's not going back? Then there's fear. I thought you said the Jews were out to get you the last time you were there in Jerusalem, not too long ago. How come you're going back? Then there's courage. Thomas, who we call Doubting Thomas. Thomas comes out and says, let us go to Jerusalem with him. Let's die with him. Then there is grief. And when he reaches to Bethany, everyone is in deep, deep grief. And then there's grief. The shortest line in the whole of the scripture, Jesus wept. Jesus wept. And the people said, see, he weeps for his friend. Could he not treat him, if he cured the man who was born blind, why couldn't he have cured this one? And Jesus wept. And Jesus continues to weep. As a human being, he wept for his friend. As man, he weeps for you, and he weeps for me. As man, he feels the whole range of human emotions, and he's taken that up into heaven. And that's symbolized in the Sacred Heart of Jesus. That every good Catholic at one time had, as soon as you opened the door of the house, you saw the Sacred Heart of Jesus. It reminds us that God's heart is broken. It's broken for you and for me because we have not lived all that God has called us to live. This text moves forward again. It moves forward again. It moves from the desolation and the weeping of Jesus to an action of God. And it is in this action of God that something starts to happen now. And the whole human emotion changes. So if we look again at the faith perspective on this text, the disciples still don't understand who Jesus is. They still don't get it. When we meet Martha, who is there still at prayer, totally contrary to how we always see Martha, a busybody of practicalities. And there Martha is filled with grief and has this incredible dialogue with Jesus when he says, if you had only been here, my brother would not have died. And Jesus says, but your brother, Martha, is going to rise again. I know he will rise again at the resurrection of the dead. And here we have the pivotal piece of our story. Who is Jesus Christ? Who is he? Who is he? And here we see Jesus says, Martha, I am. And he invokes the name by which God revealed himself to Moses. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will never die. I am the resurrection and the life. Do you believe this? That Jesus is the resurrection and the life. And in saying this, Jesus points to something that is very powerful. The whole community is worried about a man who had died. Jesus is worried about life after the grave. Poor Lazarus, and I sympathize with the guy. He dies twice because he dies the first time and Jesus brings him back to life only for him to die again. Poor Lazarus. Dying once is traumatic enough. Dying twice? But he dies twice so that the glory of God may be revealed. And in this first death, we have twice in our text, on his entry into Bethany, and then Martha or Mary says it. But he's in this grave for 4 days. And in the Jewish law, you could not recognize a person after 4 days because they had decomposed. And so you would never open a tomb after 4 days. It was against the law, the tradition, the customs, everything. And it says twice, emphasizing the fact that what is going to happen here is going beyond anything. If it was as the boy who was going on to burial, who had just died with the widow, and Jesus raised him, he is still intact. But after 4 days, he is decomposing, is what the text is saying. And what about Mary? Mary is the one praying at home. She's the contemplative, total reversal of roles. And she's there quiet in the room praying, everyone surrounding her praying. And when she gets the word, she goes out looking for Jesus, and she and Jesus have this dialogue. The line in the text that I love the most is when he reaches to the tomb and he says, roll the stone. So there is a divine action, a command, but there must be a human response. Because if nobody rolled the stone, then the next action doesn't take place. What is the rolling of the stone? How do we roll the stone? How do we open back the grave? How do we open back that which was death? You know, we sometimes take a great privilege in our graves. Huh? All the graves where the dead bodies are buried. My mother hurt me when I was this age, and because of that, this is why I am this way now. And this one did me that, and because of that, that's how I am this way now. And this one did this, and that's why I am this way now. We all have a pile of graves that we use as trophies and monuments to explain to other people why we cannot grow up, why we cannot be different, and why we cannot become holy, and why we cannot become saints. Because at 5 years old, at 7, at 10, at 12, at 9, at 14, at 25, at 45, these things happened that were death to me, and therefore I can't grow past that. Open the grave. Open the grave and allow Jesus Christ in. Open the grave. And we make such monuments out of our graves. In our history, we've made such a monument out of our graves. All the many different things that were done to us, they were terrible, they were bad, they were ridiculous, they caused incredible death for us in our psyche, in our mind. Open the graves. Let Jesus Christ in. And when the stone is rolled, when the grave is open, Jesus just simply says, Lazarus, come forth, come out, come out. In the book of Ezekiel, our first reading, when the prophet says that God means to open the graves of his people and bring them out and bring them forth. It's the same language that he used for the Exodus, bringing the people out of Egypt and into the promised land. And it's the same language he's using today for you and for me to remind us that this sickness will not end in death, but in the glory of God being revealed. So move that stone, move it, open that grave. And today, as we celebrate Eucharist together, let us hear the word of Jesus Christ. Come forth, come forth, come out of your graves. Come out of the death that we've made such a show over. Come out of the death that has been so engaging for us, that we've been hiding behind as an excuse of why we cannot become holy people. Come out of the death that we've been living in this country, working at manic pace and barely loving each other and barely relating to each other. Come out of the death that we have been creating in this country, where we have taken freedom and moved it to license and made it into a God so that no one can touch our freedom, so that our freedom is impinging on everybody else and no one can talk to it. Come out of the grave. Come out of the grave. Because God means to do a renewal in this people, in your life and in my life. But first we must open the grave. We must recognize it as a grave. We must open it and we must allow Jesus Christ in. But the sickness will not end in death because God is the resurrection and the life. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. And having brought Lazarus forth out of the grave, then he says something that is most profound. Unbind him. Unbind him. Not only must we be raised from the dead, we must be unbound. And it takes the whole community to unbind us. The whole community starts the unbinding process. And in being unbound, it means that we must be restored. That those things that have bound us up. You know how easy it is for a spouse to bind up another spouse? You know exactly which button to press to bind them? You know what I'm talking about? A friend, a parent, a child knows exactly which button to press to bind the other one. Unbind them. Unbind. Let them go free. At the very core of our text, what we're working with in the human level is a range of emotions that are huge and deep. In the divine level, what we're working with is a demonstration of God's incredible love for his people, you and me. And a demonstration that death will not have the final say. That death has no more power. Where is your power, O death? Where is your destruction? Because Jesus Christ has been raised from the dead. As we are on this Sunday that looks towards Passion Sunday, where we will contemplate the mystery of the passion of Jesus Christ, we are looking at the passion not as the first Jews and disciples did, walking with time. We are looking at the passion with a perspective of the resurrection, knowing who Jesus Christ is. And as we look at COVID-19, we are looking at it not as many other people are. We are looking at it from the perspective of who Jesus Christ is. He is the one who, when we roll the stone back, can call us forth from our death. When we roll the stone back and calls us forth, can give the orders to unbind. And the unbinding is the restoring of the person to right relationship within the community. There is a death worse than what COVID-19 is promising and threatening. And that death is the death we have been living over the last 30 years in our nation. And we're not seeing that death. That death, which was a death of our families, a destruction of integrity, a destruction of decency, a destruction of fair play, a destruction of living by values and virtues and character and principles, a destruction of trusting people that they will do the right thing because it is right, a destruction on the level of the family with parents and children, where children have stopped obeying parents and parents feeling powerless in the face of their children, a destruction of our education system, where so many children come out of the education system unfit for civilization and unfit to be citizens of this great country. And they come out with little sense of what it requires as a citizen and the responsibility that is ingrained in us because we are citizens of this country. There's a death we have been living as we've seen our murder rate rising constantly. There's a death we have been living as the quality of our life has been diminishing significantly over the last 30 years. There's a death that we have been living in this country that is more destructive and more pernicious than COVID-19. And Jesus is saying to that death will not end in death, but in the glory of God being revealed. And he's saying to us, come forth from the grave. When we all see the end of COVID-19, whenever that is, and I'm just perturbed by the lines, I must wait a little longer so that the glory of God may be revealed. I'm perturbed by those lines. But whenever that end comes, we will see the glory of God. But for that, we have to move the stone. That means in your families, you have to move that stone that has stopped that communication between you. You have to do the forgiveness work. Do it. Don't wait. Do the forgiveness work. Stop. You're in the same place. You're going to be in the same house. You're going to be real small unless the forgiveness work is done. That's moving the stone. Do the forgiveness work. Look in the eyes of your family, one by one, and say that you're sorry, that you didn't understand, you didn't realize, whatever it is. But ask for forgiveness. And let us allow this 2 weeks be a time of moving the stone, starting that forgiveness work, and allowing Jesus to call us forth from the tomb so that we can be unbinding each other. So that at the end of this period, rather than death and destruction breaking out, life, joy, and resurrection will break forth into our land. I know many people are itching on these 2 weeks. Panic. Cabin fever before it even starts. This will not end in death. But for it to end in life, we have to be engaged and allow Jesus to lead us. Open that grave. Open it. That wound that has caused such destruction in your family, open it. And if the person is not living with you, call them, FaceTime them, WhatsApp them. Engage in forgiveness work in these 2 weeks. Engage in forgiveness work because God will bring life where there seems to be death. Do not wait. And in that, the unbinding will take place. And the renewal and rebuilding of our society will take place. And you and I will see the glory of God manifest before us. And we will know who God is. Amen.